Anyone who has been into the middle school on a rainy day or the high school on a rainy day may know what I'm referring to there. But we're at a point where we are growing and we're projected to grow. And we're at a point where we can and should examine what we're going to be doing from here on out. So, Phil, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So, lots of words on this particular screen, but in to keep it brief, we're looking at all the possibilities so that we can go ahead and show the town exactly what is our minimum investments, what are our maximum investments, and where do we want to land between those 2 points. Um, this slideshow will be available on the website later tonight. So if you are more interested and haven't had enough time to read this particular slide, you can go ahead and view it there. But I don't want to waste too much of our precious time tonight focusing on it. So let's go over.
Sure. So our architect team that we are working with has evaluated the site and come up with a number of high-level options. One question that I have been asked is, are we looking at anywhere else in town to build the high school and middle school? And the answer is no. There is not a lot of space that is large enough for a single high school or middle school, let alone a campus where both would be. The only place that is a potential, like could even possibly do that is Landsake, and no one wanted to consider taking over Landsake to build the school, especially when we do have space on the site where we have a number of options. So the high school is staying on the current campus. Within that, there's some subgroups of options. One is just to maintain our existing facilities or do um, renovations to them. Then we look at a second group of option, which is to renovate and it do some additions. So those are the first two boxes on the upper left-hand side. And we're going to skip through and give you a little bit more flavor. But these would keep our existing buildings. Then we have another group of options where we would build one new building and renovate one building. So there's a general feeling, at least in the last meeting, that what we'd really like to do is build a new high school, most likely. So where would you put that? And then you'd renovate the middle school. There's challenges with this. There's a lot of desire to have our high school up front. Even though I know all of us here are big fans of the middle school. Typically the high schools get the front and center staging. So when you're trying to balance those options, some of those put it in the back. So that's another group of options, is to keep one building and renovate the other. And then the last group of options is to do completely new builds. And within there, we have options to do two separate buildings, two newer ones, which would be more expensive. And we have options to do a connected school where we'd share one footprint, but have a shared auditorium. And we'll get to those later on. So as we think about, what are the choices that need to be made at this point, what we're doing at this stage of the game is picking some high-level options. We're not picking tile colors. We're not designing the building, but what would it roughly cost for each of these options so that we can narrow it down further on which ones we want to explore. If you can skip to the next page, things that we think about are, one, what are we getting? So the baseline options, if we're not building new buildings or expanding, we're not getting more programmatic areas. We're not getting more space. And those are things we think that we need and want as a school. The timing, the construction phase alone, not the planning phases or the approval phases, which will be years in themselves, could be as little as 18 months, or it could be as long as 10 years. So the choices we make in terms of renovation and new builds and how we sequence those has a big impact on when our kids get to move into the new or upgraded spaces. What we choose has impact on temporary space needs. Where would we put kids while we're teaching them if we are renovating their existing spaces? Would we need to put them in mobile classrooms? That is, generally viewed as a real disadvantage and something we're trying to avoid. Almost all of these would have impacts on our field usage during construction. What's the programmatic impact? What spaces are best for high school or middle school? What's the impact or desirability of having the combined buildings versus separate buildings? What's the traffic flow? What are the community feels? What are the abutter impacts? There's Candleberry Road, which has a number of houses that would impact or be impacted by a lot of the new construction options. And finally, there's cost. We haven't estimated the cost, but we know that renovation can often be more expensive and it has surprise costs that construction might not. But there's ways to reduce costs, and I've listed those out here. So those are the things that the working group has been discussing. And all of the different options we're going to take you through really fast now have different trade-offs to make in terms of these aspects. So Derek, back over to you.
Yeah. And just on the point of cost, before jumping into these, so one of the main focuses of the meeting we just left was to sort of narrow down these options so that we can begin getting cost estimates. So as we're going through, keep in mind that some of these were eliminated 20 minutes ago. And Maya, Phil, if you're okay with it, I'm happy to just skip over those options.
That
So
sounds
Yes,
that,
please.
okay, great. So Phil, if we want to move on.
You got it.
So baseline A, we are just keeping the buildings as they are and bringing things up to code. This is most likely going to be the longest timeline, probably over 10 years, if not more, depending on project delays. And because we are just simply renovating, there wouldn't be many temporary space needs, if any. Work would just be done over the summers, maybe lightly into the school years, because we all know things work in a perfect timeline and flawlessly, and nothing goes wrong ever. Now, for this one, this is the only one that we have an approximate price point for the time being. It is 98 million and that's not including any adjustments for inflation. So as we're going through these other options, we don't know these prices yet, but we know for the fact to just simply take the buildings we have and give them the maintenance they need, 98 million per prospect. Baseline B, I'm pretty sure we just eliminated. So
We just kicked that one to the curb.
we just kicked that one to the curb. And the reason being is baseline B was essentially just a separate flavor of option one, which is renovate the middle school and high school, and add a little bit more to bring the program areas to the next level to plan for the projected growth that we anticipate will happen over the next several years. So in terms of sequencing, first things first, we would add on the additions. Then we would handle the renovations. Last but not least, we add those nice flavor points, the new pool, the facilities department, and a field house if the town opted to go for that. Throughout these, as we're looking at the field house, you'll notice it is a slightly transparent version of the yellow blocks indicating new buildings. And that's because it's something that's a nice to have. We're including it for just the point of optioning things out, but it's not guaranteed, not a necessity.
And Derek, a correction on this.
Yeah.
I made these slides and then was corrected in our last meeting. The architects don't think we would need mobile classrooms for this. I question that, but that's what they're saying is we would be able to not need temporary space.
Perfect. So I'll tack on the asterisks of we won't need swing spaces. Wink, wink. All right, we can go on to the next one, which is option 2. So for this one, we just played with it a little bit, actually. So before going into the nitty-gritty, that high school blocky E with an extension is down where the cursor is flagging. So one of the things we were discussing was the idea that the high school shouldn't be hidden and should be sort of a focal point. So the idea is as you're driving into the campus, one of the first things you see is the high school, the flagship of the district. So with this option, we would get a brand new high school building, and we would renovate and expand the middle school to encompass the current science wing that's at the high school. So phasing, construct the new high school, renovate the middle school, demolish the new high school, and put in those extra flavor bits. Um, for sure. Yep, we just eliminated, or that one was previously eliminated, and that one was just eliminated.
No, I think this
Am I?
one. I think this one's still in. Oh no, no, that one's not. This one's the one that we're looking at. Six
Yeah.
is still in.
Yes.
Yeah. So then we move into the options where we're building two new buildings. And this one was the preferred option between those. And in this one, we would be building first a new middle school. They'd move in, then we'd construct a new high school. And while the new high school is being built, the high school would temporarily move into the middle school that's there now. Once the new high school is built, we'd tear that one down. So this of the new, this will be more expensive than a combined, but it might actually be less expensive than renovating. Um, and, but we wanted to see this programmatically. This is what the principals think would definitely be best to have distinct high school and middle school. And so we will get this costed out so that we can understand, what we would need to do that. Then we move on to the next set of options. One of the big ways to reduce cost is to go higher. And that might also reduce the impact on abutters. So option 7 was keeping it at 2 stories, which is what our current building codes in town are. But option 8, if you shift that, shrinks that footprint by building up to 3 stories. And that does a couple of things. One, it reduces the footprint, which means less foundation, which really drops the cost down. It also makes it much more energy efficient. And it also gives the abutters a lot more space. So I've, personally, option 8 is my fave. I know it's not filled, but that is, what we're looking at. So we're really looking to get the pricing on these, I think we're going to go get prices for 5 different choices so that we as a town can start making some decisions. How much more expensive is it to get what we'd like versus a cheaper option? What are we willing to sacrifice? And those type of scenarios.
Nailed it.
So I just saw a question about the high school science wing. If you flip back, Derek, or Phil, sorry. So this one, like option 6, we would like to keep the new science wing if possible. There's many parts of the building that are not savable, but the science wing is one of them. And so we wanted to look at different options that do maintain it. So where we can maintain it, we would look at that option. They warned us that a lot of times once you get into the nitty-gritty, it turns out to be much more expensive to tear it down than it is to maintain. But at the moment, we are trying to.
And just on that topic, other areas that we're trying to preserve, or one major area that we're trying to preserve, is Proctor Field. So you'll notice not a lot of all of these, don't really touch that northwest portion of the campus, simply because that is all newer built, and we're trying to preserve, all the time, effort, and everything that went into that area.
In addition, there's a lot of wetlands that you can't see, those like red hashed areas. You can sort of see them in various places. Those are wetlands where we couldn't construct buildings. So that really limits our options throughout the site. Going on to the timeline, the overall timing of this scenario or project is something we get questioned a lot about, and we had a huge debate over this slide on our last meeting. The takeaway that I would like everyone on this call to know is that the absolute craziest best case scenario